right. Welcome back. It has been a while.
Long time.
Dan, and welcome back to the Fourth Long-Winded podcast. Dan and I are excited to be recording again. For those that do follow us, we have had a crazy couple months.
Mostly my fault.
With the bowl games and travel, and Dan became sick with Omicron, and
It wasn't fun.
just like it's been a crazy time. I'm also studying for a licensing test for work, so I've been crazy busy. So we apologize that we never finished our bowl previews.
It kind of just disappeared.
So
We're back though.
And we're gonna talk about a bowl review. Kind of talk through some of the results and impressions that we had.
It just took us a month to digest it all.
Yeah, I mean, we have NFL football now.
Yeah.
That we had to watch, and the Bengals, who I'm a fan of, I guess.
Now you are
going to the Super Bowl, which is something that I only thought I would ever say. Well, the apocalypse still may be happening.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, could you imagine a year and a half ago from now?
No.
Saying next year Matthew Stafford is going to be the quarterback of a team playing in the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals.
No.
Just imagine saying that.
I would have told you that you were on meth.
Yes. You would have been fair in that assessment.
I mean, it's wild. It's wild stuff. But back to the topic at hand, Dan. You want to maybe get us started with one of your takeaways from? One of your takeaways, thoughts.
I got about 6 takeaways, kind of broad strokes kind of things. We're not going to be breaking down individual games. They all happened more than a month ago. Nobody wants to hear that. But my first big takeaway from all the bowl games is I think the new Big 12 is going to be just fine. I think you're still going to have a lot of strength at the top. You look at it, Oklahoma State beat Notre Dame in their bowl game. Houston had a big win over Auburn in their bowl game. Baylor had a big win in the Sugar Bowl. UCF beat Florida. All these Cincinnati made the playoff. They didn't look fantastic against Alabama, but they still made the playoff. So my first big takeaway is that the new Big 12 is just going to be just fine. Is going to be just fine, and arguably it's going to be maybe slightly deeper and slightly better overall, more well-rounded. I don't think the Big 12 is going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. I've been analyzing this, honestly. Everyone here knows that I'm a Cincinnati fan, so I have a vested interest in this conference being a good conference. So I've been analyzing this and kind of looking at it, and while of course losing Texas and Oklahoma does take the
prestige,
star power.
The prestige and historical part of the conference.
I'm looking at this, and man, how many of the Big 12 teams had a losing season this year?
I don't know off the top of my head, but probably. There was a lot more around 6-6, but I'll look it up real quick.
I mean, still, it's going to be a more well-rounded league. I mean, I think that they're going to be able to compete. It's not going to be Texas has an all-time record against Kansas and they've only beat them twice. Kansas only beat Texas 3 or 4 times. It's not going to be like that.
Overall records, there was 4 teams that had a losing record overall. In conference, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of them had a losing conference record.
I'm not really worried about conference record. Overall winning record is what I'm speaking to. I don't know. The conference, it's going to be a good conference. I'm excited to see it in basketball. That's where I think this conference is really going to shine.
Yes.
You're adding
the powerhouse Big 12. The Big 12 is going to be the powerhouse in basketball.
It's going to be the absolute best conference in basketball, and there's no denying that. When you're talking about Cincinnati being one of the worst teams in your conference, you have a pretty damn good conference.
Yes.
And that's the way it's appearing to be.
Yeah.
Because Cincinnati is in the top 10 of wins all time.
Yeah.
And that's impressive.
I mean, you're going to have the defending national champions Baylor. I mean, Kansas is a blue blood college basketball team. Texas
Houston
Tech
made
has
the
been
Final
really
Four
good.
last year.
Houston's really good. Iowa State's been really good these last couple of years. Texas Tech's been, I think I just said Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Texas has been competitive in basketball, much more so than they have in college football. I mean, West Virginia's been down. Kansas State's never been a great college basketball team. They've had their moments. TCU's probably the worst of them. I put TCU probably at the bottom of that, but like it's a great conference. It's definitely
Yep.
improved a college basketball conference.
Yep. All right. So my big takeaway from bowl season, and I find it very interesting because, and honestly, it's a little bit upsetting to me as the SEC. They had the most teams in bowl games this year. They also had the worst record.
Yep. What was it? They started like 0-5 or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. They were bad. Like really, really bad.
Yeah.
And like it's infuriating to me, honestly, because like the SEC says, "Oh, we're the best conference," and yet every single year they lose every bowl game except the national championship and still claim to be the best conference. And it's like, how can you do that? How can you claim to be the best conference when you literally lose every bowl game?
Yep.
Like South Carolina is your one team besides Georgia and Alabama that won a bowl game. So riddle me that.
Yeah.
And they'll of course SEC supporters will say, well, the players don't care. They opt out. And it's like, okay.
But you're supposed to have you all have recruiting classes. Like I just saw we just had signing day and yesterday, and Vanderbilt is a top 35 recruiting class for this coming season.
And they're the worst.
And they're the worst team.
Yes.
So even with players sitting out and guys opting out to go prepare for the NFL draft, first of all, teams like Vanderbilt don't have guys that are opting out going to the NFL draft because they don't really have anybody getting drafted. But you still should have an immense amount of talent waiting behind the bench because you got 3, 4, 5 stars, maybe not 5 stars, but you got 4 stars everywhere. So I don't think that's a good argument saying, well, your best players are out. You got great ones sitting behind them. So.
Yeah, and also it just devalues the games when you do that. Like, what's at that point when you're saying, oh, well, the players don't really care, or, oh, well, you can't really judge a conference based on the bowl games because of this, then what's the point in playing them?
Yep. I don't know. I think the point has always been a celebration, but still, I think you could take something away from it. These are all teams that have had winning records that are at the very least are 6-6, so that they're competitive teams. So I don't know. I don't think it's a good argument to say, well, and when you're talking about opt-outs, most of the time it's like 1, 2, maybe at the most 5 or 6 guys that aren't playing in for your team in the bowl game. It's not like your entire starting offense is not going to be playing in a bowl game. Your entire defensive line isn't playing in a bowl game. So like.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of your team is still intact for that bowl game. So I just don't think that's a good argument. I agree with you. SEC overrated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think that kind of brings me to like my real feelings on this year's bowl season is with all of the games being canceled, it just felt not as exciting.
I definitely I can share with you. It only ended up being like 3 or 4 of them that were actually canceled, I think. Like it wasn't in totality, it was a very small percentage of the bowls that were canceled. It was just like it was big news, and it was like, oh, the I loved the Barstool Bowl being put in its place. Like
yeah, me too.
They had this great idea to broadcast it all themselves, and then one of the teams got canceled, and it was like, wait, we can go play on CBS instead. All right, deuces,
and make $3.5 million compared to 300,000. They're like
deuces. All right, so
yeah, no,
go ahead.
So yeah, that's kind of just like my more at large point is this this bowl season for some reason just didn't feel that important to me. It didn't feel, and I don't know if maybe this was different for me because it truthfully was like I was really by the end of the season just gun ho on Cincinnati, focusing on Cincinnati.
We had a lot of great bowl games. I think it was a good bowl season in totality.
It was a good. I'm not saying it was a bad bowl season. Just for some reason that there wasn't the level of excitement for me. Yeah. I just wasn't as enthused about the bowls this year as I have been in the past.
Fair enough. Yeah, you had your focus on Cincinnati, which is fair. I want to touch on my second takeaway. You mentioned South Carolina being the only other SEC team outside of Georgia and Alabama that really did anything in bowl season. And that's another one of my takeaways is South Carolina in general and Shane Beamer. And he has gone into South Carolina and has turned that program around. Now they got a former 5-star quarterback, probably would be considered more of a 4-star now, in Spencer Rattler, transferring in this coming season. They beat their cross-state or their adjacent rivals, North Carolina, in the greatest bowl game of them all, the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Mm-hmm. I think South Carolina is on the right path, and I think Shane Beamer is got to be in the conversation for what is going to be in the conversation for one of the best head coaches in college football these next couple of years.
I agree, and honestly, South Carolina has everything that it has the resources to win. It has everything that you could need to win. Like Clemson won a national championship. Clemson's slipping a little bit. I could see them.
That's another takeaway I have is Clemson. I'll get to that in a second.
I feel like that's more of a off-season type conversation.
Well, my takeaway for Clemson, we'll just get to it now, is everybody said Clemson had this huge disappointing season. They had 10 wins. They finished with 10 wins. And that's a dramatically disappointing, oh my God, what's going on in Clemson season?
I mean, in SEC country, that is disappointing.
I mean, but it's just, I'd be thrilled if Purdue won 10 games and that was considered a disappointment.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I've been there too. This last 4-year stretch for Cincinnati has just been amazing.
Yep.
So yeah, I get it, but that's the South, and that's big time college football for you.
Yeah.
My next takeaway is the group of 5. The group of 5 versus the Power 5. Dan, what is the general perception of the comparison? In your opinion?
The group of 5, in my opinion, or what the national consensus is?
National consensus.
Okay. The national consensus would tell you that the group of 5 is very much subpar to the Power 5. That they are not in the same class. Their recruiting numbers will show you that. They just turn their nose down at the group of 5. Say they don't play anybody. Their conferences are terrible. Sure, Cincinnati goes 12-0 and 8-0 in their conference, but they aren't playing anybody. That would be the national consensus.
Yeah. So why do you think that they went 5-1 against Power 5 teams this year with the lone loss being Cincinnati to Alabama in the playoffs?
The national consensus is wrong. The group of 5, while maybe not completely similar in terms of depth of conference, it is definitely not at the level where the national consensus believes it is. They are a competitive group. Even the MAC. MAC, they didn't have the best record, but they're competitive in their games, and they're not shut out and stomped on in all their bowl games. So I don't know.
I think that this is one of my biggest complaints with the national media is that, and honestly, it's gotten worse over time. And you can see that from how the AP used to rank teams when it was just the BCS versus how they rank teams now. And the playoff has made it worse.
Oh, yeah.
In that because it's essentially an auto bid for 4 of the 5 Power 5 teams. That doesn't exist. There is no actual difference besides money. It's just the five conferences that make the most money. That's it. That's the only thing.
The most money and have the
they're allowed to
biggest
change the
deals with the
rules.
TV companies.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just, to me, that is where I think the national media really needs to focus, because the majority of the fans aren't Alabama fans. In fact, there are more Power or Group of Five schools than there are Power Five schools. I think you can really elicit some really good opinions and get a lot of views from focusing on
It's a starved
more.
community.
Yeah, it's a starved community. I mean, when's the last time you saw a piece on Eastern Carolina's recruiting class?
I don't think I've ever seen a piece on Eastern Carolina.
Exactly.
Class.
But that's a massive fan base. It's a really big fan base that they're just like missing out on. And I don't understand it. Like, why are you not? I get that they're not that good. And like, we tend to focus on who is good. And I understand that. Like, and to some degree, we should still focus on that. However, like,
well, when was the last time you saw a piece on UCF's recruiting classes? UCF's been a very good school, very good team for the past 5-10 years, and like they're competitive and they're in a pretty big market. I mean, they're in Orlando. That's a pretty big area.
Like 11th largest market.
Yeah, and I mean that's a better example than Eastern Carolina.
Fair enough.
I don't think you're going to win a lot of people over with Eastern Carolina.
UCF is the biggest school in the country.
In terms of alumni or in terms of like enrollment?
Population, and one of the biggest in terms of alumni. It is massive. They have a massive amount of living alumni. Mainly because they're not that old of a school.
Yeah.
But they have a huge amount of living alumni. And it's in a recruiting hotbed. Like, it just, so much of it doesn't make sense to me. I get on my soapbox a lot about the Power Five versus Group of Five, and I realize that it's kind of it's a moot point because nothing's going to change, but I'm still pissed about it. That's so fair. I'm gonna let everyone that's willing to listen know that I'm still angry about it.
Every episode we'll go back to it. At some way, somehow we'll get back to a Group of Five Cody soapboxing. All right. I have 3 more takeaways that I want to get to fairly quickly because we're already 15 minutes in or so. North Carolina, they are my most disappointing team this season. I don't even think it's fairly close. People make an argument for Clemson. I'm sorry, I'm not taking that argument because, like I said before, they won 10 games this year. I understand that's a disappointment in relative sense, but North Carolina started the season as a top 10 team. And they went.
I personally thought that they were going to make the playoffs.
Playoff aspirations. They had playoff aspirations. They had a quarterback that was supposed to be a top 5 pick. They had a legendary head coach in Mac Brown, and they just kind of completely shit the bed and finished 6-7, I think. I believe that's what 6-7 was their final record. So my big takeaway is North Carolina might have missed its opportunity. They still have a pretty good recruiting class this next year, and looking forward into the future, I think they'll still continue to recruit well. But I think this could have been their one chance, not their only chance, but their one chance right now to really kind of seize on that. Clemson was down this year. Pitt was the best team from the ACC this year, so Wake Forest, I guess, was another great team in the ACC. But I was really, really disappointed in North Carolina this season. I know you were too. You were a big North Carolina guy.
Yeah, I was a real believer in Mac Brown, and I'm probably still gonna get on the horse again, be a UNC
start
fan
that
next
hype
year.
Train again next year.
We're just a fun team, like the colors, the stadium. It's just a great story. Like everything about UNC is fun, at least when we're talking about football. So,
not so good. Yeah, basketball right now.
I'm also disappointed in UNC. I would also have to. I mean, they absolutely are the biggest disappointment for me this season. The biggest success or like most surprising success is, I think, going to have to be Wake Forest.
That's fair. That's fair.
Like just off the top of my head, like I'm shocked that they were as good as they were.
I think Arkansas also deserves to be in this conversation, at least in the conversation. Arkansas and, I mean, Oklahoma State maybe. I mean, Oklahoma State's always kind of in that ballpark, but they stayed on a lot longer than I thought they would. I thought they'd lose a lot sooner in the season. But I think Wake Forest is far and away the most surprising.
I can see Arkansas. For me personally, it was not as surprising just because I saw the progress that they made last year. And like with the recruiting class that they have, with Sam Pittman, like I kind of knew they had to make strides to be better because they
had to, but historically, the past 10 years, they hadn't made that step. They'd had the recruiting class, but they hadn't made the step. They made that step this year.
Right, but I think like I've none of the other times have they ever, like in year one with a coach, looked competitive even though they were bad. Because in year one with Sam Pittman, they looked competitive and like almost beat some teams that they shouldn't have beat. But that's something that they've always missed. And so in year two, I was like, okay, if he took them that far, what can he do with another year and his own? Yeah,
his own guys.
The progression is there. Like I see that. I saw it coming, and I don't think I would have predicted that they would have ended in the top 20. But I knew they were going to have
They got up to like number 7 in the country at one point. They were like number 6 or 7 in the country at one point. I think that qualifies as a surprising season because nobody.
I agree. Also, yes, South Carolina is pretty surprising.
Yes, South Carolina, not to the same level because they only went like 7-6 or something like that. But I mean, compared to what they had done the last 5-7 years, that's very surprising. Your original point, you started with Wake Forest. You want to talk about Wake Forest a little bit more? The way that you started, surprising.
I mean, it was surprising. There's not too much you got to say about it. They were an awesome team. They were really fun. The offense was really fun to watch. It goes to show that Dino Babers didn't really know what he was doing at Bowling Green. He just simply took over a really good team that knew how to play offense.
It's a big win for them keeping.
We're going to continue to do that.
It's a big win for Wake Forest keeping Dave Clawson after the
massive one. I still think that if Jim Harbaugh ever decides to leave or gets fired from Michigan, which he's now safe for a few more years.
No, he's gone next year. I have theories about Jim Harbaugh, and he's going to be the head coach. He's going to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins a year from right now.
Okay, we'll get into that. Probably not this episode though. But no, I mean, I still think that Michigan, Dave Clawson is the perfect fit for Michigan, 100%. If they hired him, it would be a slam dunk. They would love him. That he would win like 6 national championships.
6 national championships. Wow.
He didn't die first. Okay. He's getting up there in age.
He's getting Nick Saban territory.
But yeah, no, I mean, Wake Forest was fun to watch, man. They were a really fun team.
Couldn't play defense, but damn, they scored points.
Them winning 10 games.
Yeah. And being in the playoff conversation. Like, they were legitimately in the playoff conversation for a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, my next to last takeaway is stop complaining and shitting on players for opting out of bowl games. Just stop. Because the Matt Corral situation, that is why players don't want to play in the bowl games. Their entire future, millions of dollars are on the line. It's their decision. Why are you for not playing in the Duke's Mayo Bowl or these random bowls? College playoff, I think that's a little different. I wouldn't like to see a guy, and I don't think a guy would opt out if their team is in the playoff. But I think that it's just enough of people complaining about players opting out and just shitting on them and telling them that this all stems from the Kirk Herbstreit sound that he spoke about on College Game Day, where players don't it doesn't mean as much to them nowadays as it did back in the day. And that's just completely false. It still means just as much to them, but there's more money waiting for them on the other side. There's more risk in playing a game that in reality doesn't really have that much of an impact on whether they're going to get drafted higher or whether they're going to get drafted at all. So I don't really care. Do what you want, players. Get that bag, secure it.
So I have a couple points to this. I overall do agree that we should stop trashing players and stop talking shit about them for leaving for the NFL. It only makes sense. These guys are gonna make that money, and honestly, like Jadeveon Clowney probably would have been like a second round pick if he hadn't had that monster of a game against Michigan. So yes, there's opportunity that you can improve your draft block.
But it takes an insane play because he only improved his draft stock based on that one play.
And how are you gonna like get that play? You know, like what are the chances you're gonna get that play?
Yeah, it's far more likely you step wrong and tear your ACL. And
far more likely.
Yes.
And he's the only player that I can think of that has done that.
Yes.
So that being said, I do think that players care about the Bulls less now.
Yeah.
But do you want to know why I think that?
Because the rest of the media doesn't care. The rest of the country doesn't care about them as much.
Because there are more Bulls now than ever. They literally added a bowl so that someone that was
they used the same field
could go.
They didn't even change the logo on the field.
Like, you can't tell me these bowl games are so magically important and then just add it because you can.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. They're not important.
Well, the TV coverage is telling you that they're not important. You go on ESPN, and ESPN broadcasted every single bowl game except for like one or two during this bowl season. And during that entire time, you don't see big advertisements about any of the bowl games. You'll see like coming up next, the Quick Lane Bowl, and that's all the promotion you'll see for it. All the promotion on ESPN is all for the playoff. They're telling you what to care about through that promotion. They're like, all that matters is the college football playoff. That's what they're telling you throughout the entire season, is that this is the only thing that matters.
Why no one cares about the bowl games?
Yep. Because you've been telling us that that's the only thing that matters this entire season.
Which is fair. I've fallen victim to that. I care more about the playoff than anything.
But it's no wonder. It's no wonder that the players don't care about it as much. To round up that conversation, it's because none of us really care about the bowl games as much.
Agreed.
All right, my last thing. Yes. My my last thing, and it's homerism. Boiler the fuck up, because the greatest game of bowl season was the Trans Perfect Bowl in the Trans Perfect Music City Bowl, whatever the fuck it was called. It was the greatest game of bowl season. It was entertaining, it was controversial, and I got to watch 50,000 Tennessee fans walk out of that stadium, head in their hands, pissed off, sad, and it was the greatest experience ever. But I'm back in on Purdue. I'm back in on Jeff Brom. I believe in this team. The way we finished the season, Aiden O'Connell's coming back. His offense that he had at Western Kentucky that put up all the yards and all the points, that's starting to translate to Purdue. It wasn't the first couple of years he was there. They had their moments where they'd explode on Ohio State for 45 points, but then they'd score 13 the next week. But it's becoming more consistent. I have more faith. Our recruiting classes are getting slightly better. They're not outstanding still, but they're getting slightly better. We got a good quarterback coming in this coming year. I'm back in on Purdue.
All right.
After wanting to fire Jeff Brom literally 6 months ago.
Yeah, I can see that. My take on Cincinnati moving forward is I really feel that Cincinnati is a force to be reckoned with, especially with Luke Fickell still being there. As long as he stays there, they are going to be a really good team. I don't know about next year. Like they got Arkansas to start the season. I think that's going to be a tough game at Arkansas. But you win that, I there's not another game on the schedule that you can't win. Um, because they have one road game in non-conference, one true road game in non-conference. They play a game in Paul Brown Stadium that's technically a Miami, Ohio home game, but it's in Paul Brown, so Miami has to travel farther for that game. So I mean, I think Cincinnati is going to be. I don't know that they're going to be back in that playoff conversation just because they're still in the group of five. Um, and even if they go undefeated, I don't know that they would have the resume to.
Arkansas isn't a win that's going to be in the same caliber as the Notre Dame win.
As the Notre Dame one, yeah. Unless Arkansas goes undefeated outside of Cincinnati, then I'm like, okay, maybe.
Yeah, your ideal situation is Cincinnati wins at Arkansas to start the season,
and then plays them in.
Everybody like shits on Arkansas, like, oh, Arkansas back to being Arkansas, but then Arkansas like runs the table the rest of the year, and it's like, well, do we have to put Cincinnati in again? Like, yeah.
I wouldn't mind. Wouldn't be upset. I'll be an Arkansas fan after week 1.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I have for our bowl season talk. Dan, do you have anything else you want to add?
I don't. That'll be it. Thanks to everybody for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to this video. Tell us all your thoughts and opinions on bowl season down below. Also, find our Spotify. We'll have a link to that down in the comments or down in the description. Also, find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. We're on TikTok too. We haven't really posted to that, but you can go follow it anyways. Also, follow mine and Cody's personal Twitters. Those are right below our names right there. So, but yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Love you.
Bye.